Welcome back, everybody, and good day. We are here with another episode of the Buckeye Blitz podcast. I'm your host, Chad Stryker. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to listen. And if you could, if you wouldn't mind, hit that like button. It helps us surface with other Buckeye football related content. So if you didn't know, if I haven't told you, we've passed 5,000 views. And if you didn't know or haven't heard, I took a little bit of a break. I took about 10 days off just to take some time to reevaluate what we're going to do with the podcast, to line up some people to join the podcast with me, to talk Buckeye-related football information, and then kind of how to handle the amount of information going forward. I try to bring you as much comprehensive information as I can, but there's a lot. And I work a full-time job, and I have a young family, and we are always busy. And I do this free of charge, so I don't get paid to do this. It's just something fun I like to do and talk Buckeye football. So, I'm not at the Woody. I don't live in Columbus. I have a lot of colleagues, a lot of associates, and I've made some inroads with a lot of the beat reporter folks over the last 6 months, 8 months or so of this, where I try to, kind of be in the know if something big is going to come. If you follow me on Twitter, you would have seen that I was predicting a couple booms over the weekend, and we got a couple booms. And actually, I was in Columbus on Friday night, so I knew that the Bryce West commitment was coming and that they were working on the graphic. Obviously, we never want to give away or take away a kid's moment. So, big news on that front. I have a couple things I'd like to kind of update you about my podcast. The first being, I am working on and will have ready in August the audio version of the podcast on Apple Podcasts. So if you want to listen while you're driving or at the gym or something like that, you don't have to have YouTube up playing in the background. You'll be able to find us on Apple Podcasts. That's coming. The other piece that kind of came to fruition out of my time away was that I'm going to stick with what's specifically going on with the team. Trying to keep up with recruiting and trying to keep up with like what all the recruits are doing and where they are and who they're talking to and who might flip and who's visiting where and what all the crystal balls are. I'm still going to follow that as closely as I can, just to be as up to date and comprehensive as I can. However, if you look at like Steve Wiltfong and 247 Sports, like, they have a whole team dedicated to just tracking and following what's going on with commitments and what's going on with uncommitted players and where they are and who they are. And so that said, I won't be doing recruiting as much. If we get a commitment or I'm expecting a commitment, I'll kind of give you an update on that. The second half of the show, I'll kind of give you an overview of who was all here on the 17th and the 24th and kind of where I think we stand and who's what and kind of like what, where I feel like we are. So that's kind of that. So that was the other piece of what I wanted to talk about was, again, Apple Podcasts coming soon. Probably not going to be doing as much on recruiting. So first and foremost, we're officially in the dead period for Ohio State football, so the coaches have their out-of-office reply on. They've taken their families and they've jetted off to somewhere tropical, I hope, to relax because the June camp season is over. It was busy. They had a lot of folks in. They had a lot of recruits in. And from all areas concerned, all points concerned, Ohio State knocked it out of the park. They were doing great with every recruit. Mad props to the foundation as far as what they've been able to do in the last year with NIL. Man, talk about completely different from year one to year two. I know that early on I was really, really high on the foundation. I thought Brian and Cardale were doing a great job. I did a whole podcast about it because Austin Ward talked some smack about Brian and the foundation, and look where they are now. They're doing great. They're working hand in hand with the Buckeye football team and basketball team. So stay with it, stay focused. If you can donate, I know funds are slim right now because of the inflation and everything, and I'll stay away from political stuff. But if you can, and you want to do a recurring donation of even like $10 a month, 100,000 people at $10 a month make a pretty big dent in the NIL space and funds. So great job again, and I was just blown away by what people had to say when they got done with camp, and from all avenues is the way I'll say it. Ohio State did everything they could. They were just on point with all of these recruits. So they did end up getting a couple booms, as I mentioned, over the weekend. So cornerback, the number one player in Ohio, Bryce West, verbally committed to Ohio State. And his teammate from Cleveland Glenville, Demarion Witten, a tight end, also committed to Ohio State. He was thought to be a Kentucky lean. There was a lot of drama around that with some people groaning, if you know what I mean. But I'm glad to see that pipeline open. Thank you to Ted Ginn Sr. for reopening that pipeline. I'm glad to have those two in the fold. Arvell Reese committed last year, so that was great. And I think that's wonderful. And so if you're wondering a little bit about Bryce West, again, some services have him as the number one player in Ohio. Some have Aaron Scott, the other corner that we're actively chasing, the number one player in Ohio. And then Demarion Witten is a kind of a tweener at tight end. He's more of a receiver than he is a blocker, but I think you'll start to see him focus on blocking as things come to fruition. As he starts to head towards Ohio State, I think he'll start working on that a little bit more, and to help him be ready for the jump to the Big Ten. But he's a matchup nightmare. He's like 6'4", 6'5", over 200 pounds, and catches everything. So he's one of those elite pass-catching tight ends. So there's a role for him, and he'll do well at Ohio State. Other folks that were in over the weekend, Aaron Scott, as I mentioned. People are actively, including myself, waiting to see what he does, because what he does will cause a lot of the other dominoes to kind of fall into place. Wilt Fong and Bill Kurlick and others have said that, they have him crystal ball to Ohio State. Michigan is in it. If you're asking me today, I would say it's like 65-35. I mean, Michigan's right there. They're not giving up. But I think at the end of the day, Aaron Scott's parents love Ohio State. I think he ends up a Buckeye. I don't know when that commitment will come. I expect before the middle of the middle of July, but that impacts a lot of things, because you're going to get a commitment on July 6th from Miles Lockhart, another cornerback from Arizona. Now, he's a nickel guy. He's not an outside guy. He's not tall, but like Scott and West. But Miles Lockhart has not taken any other official visits. I would say he's about as close to a Buckeye lock as you can get. Anything can happen, but I expect that to happen. Kobe Black was here, had a great time. I think you're going to have a tough time getting him out of Texas. Texas A&M's in the mix too. But Ohio State certainly put themselves in a good position. They put their best foot forward. They're right in it. Same with KJ Bolden. Both Kobe Black's parents and KJ Bolden's parents familiar with Ohio State, like Ohio State. I think that they've done everything they can, and I wouldn't be surprised to see one of them end up in the class, and if they got both, that would be great. I tweeted this out over the weekend, or I guess about 8 days ago now, where I tweeted this list out, and the amount of hate I got from our fan base and other fan bases about the fact that Ohio State could pull all these guys in, there were some really unhappy people saying some not so nice things about my football intelligence, and I spend more time understanding and studying football than probably 95% of the rest of the world, if they're not a coach or a podcaster or an analyst or something. I maybe could have worded it differently, but the fact of the matter is, I think Ohio State's right there with these guys. So Again, KJ Bolden, Kingston Bayamasa from California, the linebacker. I think they're right there. He was at Notre Dame recently too, so it's a Notre Dame, USC, Ohio State fight. I think Ohio State put themselves in a great position to land him. Boy, that would be really, really nice to pull him in. Edric Houston, a defensive end. I mentioned Marquise Lightfoot, another defensive end. I think they're right there for both of them. If not, if they don't verbally commit soon, anything could happen. But I like where they are. And then maybe even Brandon Baker, the 5-star offensive tackle out of Mater Dei. I will just tell you that when Ohio State pulls a kid from Mater Dei, I will believe that they got a kid from Mater Dei. But up to this point, it hasn't happened. Oregon seems to be in the lead for that. But Ohio State, they're in it. They're in the mix of it. Same with Jeremiah McClellan. I think he ends up a Buckeye. Zaquan Patterson also, I think he ends up a Buckeye, a defensive lineman, more of a 3-technique guy. Dylan Stewart, another defensive lineman. I think they are right there for all this list of guys. And so I again, if you follow me on Twitter, I ended up deleting the tweet because I was just tired of people just, it's okay to have an opinion, but and I'm all for interactions on Twitter. I have fun with a lot of Michigan folks just to mess with them. My favorite thing is to tweet the banner of them being 5-17 since 2000 and like 0-6 in bowl games under Jim Harbaugh. Like, I like to have fun. I'm all about having fun, but some of what people were saying just was unkind, and I also, if you drop the F-bomb or you're in your tweet, I'm just going to block you. I won't even respond. You're just going to get blocked. I don't mess around with that. We don't use that language in my house, and I don't want to read it. So if you follow me on Twitter or you comment on Twitter and you do that, I'm just going to block you. So that said, Ohio State did well. Camp season, it's over. I expect them to have like a big, what I'll call family dinner at the end of July to bring all the recruits back in, hype them back up, remind them why they love Ohio State, remind them why Ohio State loves them. Last year they didn't do that because they had the Notre Dame game on the schedule the second week of September. And so I think it actually hurt Ohio State to not do that because there's a big gap between mid-June and 1st of September, and a lot of time and a lot of things can happen and a lot of chirping in people's ears. So I don't foresee them doing that this year. I don't think they're going to skip it. I think they'll have it. Would not be surprised if you have more commitments between now and the middle of July. It's important really for Ohio State to know specifically what happens with Aaron Scott so they know what direction they're going with some others that they may be in on, other cornerbacks they may be in on if they would happen to lose out on Aaron Scott. Someone asked me why this thing with Aaron Scott's such a big deal. And somebody else mentioned, well, what about Jordan Marshall? Two very different recruitments. Ohio State was in on Aaron Scott really, really early in the process. And in fact, might have been one of his very first offers, Division I offers. And then Jordan Marshall, they got there late to the party. Marshall, because he's in Ohio, I think Ohio State took the old, well, he's in Ohio, we can get him if we want him approach. And also, Ohio State was in big on James Peoples. They were also in on Stacey Gage and some other national guys. And Peoples is a great running back, great kid. He's going to be a great Buckeye. He's ranked ahead of Jordan Marshall. Two very different recruitments, quite honestly, just totally different. The Aaron Scott and Michigan thing, it matters because it's an Ohio State-Michigan battle, but if they miss out on him, they got one of the two. They got Bryce West. And then they go hard after Kobe Black and KJ Bolden. And they go all in on them. That's what happens. So they're going to take probably 4 corners in this class, and I want it to be Aaron Scott. I want him to be a Buckeye, but if he chooses Michigan, then again that it's kind of a shot across the bow to Ohio State. But Michigan's won the game the last 2 years. They've been doing a lot of chirping. they're terrible in bowl games, and they got, basically got ran out of the stadium by TCU until the last couple minutes of the game. But nonetheless, Michigan's in it for Aaron Scott. So I like that Ohio State's in on some of these national guys. You still got to go national for some of your talent, and I like it. And then obviously with Coach Fry, he's working on some of those West Coast kids, has those West Coast connections, which is nice. It's not a terrible thing to have. So the last thing I'll say is this year for the recruiting, besides NIL just being completely, utterly, and totally 180 degrees better than they were last year. There's tape now of the defense. So when these recruits are on campus and they're sitting down with the position coaches or sitting down with Jim Knowles, he can point to the screen and say, hey, this is where I see you playing, and this is how I see you fitting into our scheme, and this is why we need you, and this is what you would do in this situation, and this is how I visualize you playing and you getting to the next level and making you a first-round pick, and this is what we can do with your skills and talents and assets, and we need you because you do this better than anybody I've seen, and that's how it fits in our scheme. So that's kind of where I believe that is. That's kind of how I see that fitting together. And quite honestly, I think that goes light years for these recruits. I think it speaks to them on a very real level. So Ohio State did everything they could. They had a fantastic June with recruitment. They've put all their chips on the table. They've put themselves right in the mix for these guys. I'll keep my eyes on it. I'll keep you updated. I'll listen, try to read the tea leaves, listen for the hoof prints, and, we'll see what happens. I think good things are coming for Ohio State, though. I think they're on the up and up. And if you listen to anybody that follows recruiting, Ohio State's in a really, really good place. So the last thing I'll leave you with, something to look forward to, the Penn State game. I'll be at that game. It's going to be a Scarlet out, so get your Scarlet jerseys together. And we'll have a good time cheering on the Buckeyes in that game. And I think I might wear my Olave jersey back there. So that'll be a fun one. Looking forward to that. You guys have a great rest of your week. I'll see you for Buckeye Friday. Take care. Be careful out there with if you have breathing problems or lung problems or health problems. That weather it's awful. And turn on your air purifiers if you got them. So take care. See you Friday. Go Bucks.